do we know the real terms of the Griezmann deal? And luckily for you, Bachir, according to Laporta, who had a press conference right after you asked the question, Griezmann must play 50% of the matches he can take part in for the purchase option of Atleti to become mandatory at 40 million euros. He has also taken a 40% pay cut to basically sweeten the deal so that Barca could offload him and Atleti could afford him. So the 40% pay cut too. Then the second year also would go into effect, meaning Atleti would have a year before he becomes a free agent, which is the same thing that Barca would have dealt with anyway because of the length of his contract, which basically means that, to me, this should happen in year one. The really telling thing, though, Emile, was that Laporta also said what we all knew. I think we all expected something from him, but he gave everything. He didn't fit in our system. He was not the player we needed. He always had a good attitude and was professional. I sent him a message wishing him to do well. And I think that basically sums up most Kool-Aid's opinions, right?
I was going to say, that sounds about right.
He worked really hard, but he just, again, I say it that Francesca and I years ago said, I don't know about this. Where's he going to play? Where's he going to fit? And if anything, now that Messi was gone, I mean, I know it was only 2 matches and a preseason, still didn't make sense to me. It's somehow a new player arrived and it just still didn't make sense. Fati wasn't even back yet and still didn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree. No, I think that perfectly kind of sums up the whole thing. I mean, even when you could tell that he was very frustrated and the breaks weren't going his way, or he wasn't getting the balls he wanted, or, you know, finding the net and things like that, he seemed like he was a decent teammate. Like, he didn't seem like his head was down, or he was a malcontent, or kind of a problem in the dressing room or anything. No, I think he worked hard. Like, he's a really good player. It was just a bad fit and a bad situation for a really good player.
Yeah, it's so weird too with the decision and how all that went down with the documentary. And apparently, I mean, I would believe it if some of his teammates didn't particularly take to him quickly in the locker room, but I think he was well liked. You could see, and I mean, we don't want to read body language to play that game, but he just seemed to be a fun guy that his teammates did enjoy being around. And I wonder how much professional respect he was garnering, though. I think when the moments got tough, that's when we don't see, right? Because Alba, we see one camera angle from that halftime against Liverpool, not knowing anything else. And that's going to define a defining image of Alba's career is those tears that he shed, right? And so when the going got tough, we don't know what Griezmann was like behind closed doors. We don't know what that was like. And you assume that maybe his teammates didn't fully get on board with, he didn't really help. Let's say he didn't detract, or people didn't hate him, but maybe he also didn't help in those big moments either, which you'd hope the leader of your team did. And I'm interested too to play the body language game. I was watching, it was going on Twitter yesterday, how João Felix is now, it was a regular defensive drill, but when you looked at the faces who was in that drill, it was all defenders plus João Felix, as if Diego Simeone, and I don't know. I think professional social media accounts are quite smart. Maybe they are. And that he knew that was happening, and he did this on purpose just to make people believe, hey, are you going to convert him into a wing back? I mean, that becomes easily, if he plays wing back, 120 million euros. We joked about it that's maybe where Griezmann should go. But if Simeone actually does put his 120 million player at fullback, that is full Diego Simeone. That is the epitome of Diego Simeone.
Oh, I mean, that would be peak Jolismo. I mean, it would just be the greatest thing. Well, I mean, the greatest frustration in watching an Atleti game, particularly if you want a certain, and I don't necessarily mean I want every match to end 4-3 or 5-0 or anything like that. But I've watched Atleti games where they come out and they look good. They're moving the ball. Everything's kind of going fluidly. They can't seem to find the goal. The hallmark Atleti game is where they score at about 38 minutes and batten down the hatches till halftime. And then the entire second half, it's like no one can breathe. But I've always taken it to believe that Diego Simeone feels that any scoring more goals than is absolutely necessary to win this particular game is somehow, like, I don't know, gauche. So I could absolutely see him just putting apex attacking talent at wingback.
Yeah, I mean, I know Barca doesn't have any money now, but that's something where I understand how Atletico Madrid want to make good on that investment. Obviously, just like Barca with Coutinho and Antoine Griezmann, while the wages are not as high because he was a younger player, João Felix's agent is going to be motivated to try to figure out how to make sure he gets that next contract. Because remember, he came at, what was he, 19 when he came from Benfica?
He's only like
21 now.
21, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, just like what we talked about, ES Mariba, I know it was a huge transfer and I know his wages are high for a 21-year-old, but he's still waiting on that next payday or that next renewal or that next extension. And right now, with him in the position he's in, his agent and the player don't have the negotiating leverage they need to, especially with outside clubs. If he were to, I think his contract's till at least 2023, 2024. So he really has no options other than kind of sticking it out and making the best of it. And again, Atletico Madrid is like, even though Diego Simeone might say, hey, I'm not really using him, the club so trusts in Diego Simeone. It's one of those rare examples where the manager does have more power than that player, but that player is so valuable that you can't possibly be, have a good conscience about offloading him. And so if I'm Barca, I'm like, hey, in a year, maybe you guys scratch our backs again because we gave you Griezmann and we maybe help you win the league again, just like we gave you Suarez. So how about you give us your one-to-way, really expensive player on loan, just like we gave Coutinho to Bayern Munich. We'll see what happens, right? Like if I'm Barca, I'm really pushing for that next year, if they're not already for January.
Yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense. And I mean, I think the good thing is that, and I'm trying to think through this comparison that I want to make, because it's not a perfect like-for-like comparison, but I think among managers today, I mean, because Liverpool has kind of the transfer committee. I know Klopp has significant influence and very much has a voice in that room. Yeah. But I think of Diego Simeone is probably the closest thing to like almost an Alex Ferguson style manager, where he completely occupies and embodies the club that he's at.
Right.
And every decision goes through him. And to an extent, like, I don't know if he's bigger than the club, but he is bigger than any other individual at the club.
I mean, 100%. And we'll have to see whoever comes after him or whoever comes after him or her. It's interesting with Diego Simeone in the future with Atletico Madrid, because he led them into their, I mean, again, not to be all history buff or whatever, but, this is the second great era, if you will, in Atletico Madrid history. But the first one was like, I think in the 30s. So
they won like 5 or 6 back then, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're really talking about the greatest modern era Atletico Madrid, and it's gone on almost for a decade.
Also when he was on the team in, I wrote about this one time. So I wrote about the 96-97 Barca team, but in doing so, I did kind of research on the 95-96 season, and Atleti won the domestic double that year, and Diego Simeone was on that team.
Right.
And so he's kind of everything that he's been alive for and he could possibly have been present for that's been great in his last 3 decades of Atletico football has been, I mean, he's been there. His fingerprints are all over it.
Right. And it seems like in world football right now, Griezmann, going back to Griezmann and Bashir's question, trying to put a bow on this, that Griezmann is a player that Simeone enjoys and likes. Yeah. And Deschamps is basically the only other manager that's like, we really like this guy. We really think he can do a job in our system.
Well, I think the funny thing is what we, and I mean, Barca fans and probably behind the scenes, whether it was the coaches or players or anything, what we were trying to talk ourselves into with Antoine Griezmann is these are real qualities that he has, the tireless work rate and kind of the ability to hold the ball up and, sort of the play the tight little exchanges and things like that. These are things that are recognizable qualities, but we were talking ourselves into them because we wanted him to be just pumping in the goals or, at least trying to more or something like that. But that, I think, is almost more than goal scoring. That's what Diego Simeone wants from his strikers, is a never-ending just wellspring of stamina and a willingness to run and hold up the ball and take the air out of it too when they need to kind of really control the tempo of the game.
Yeah, and I think we're simplifying it, but we kind of said it, and the numbers back it up, that Atletico Madrid can win the title by scoring less goals than Barcelona because they concede less. So if Antoine Griezmann gets 1 goal in a game and Atletico Madrid wins 1-0, that counts for the same 3 points when he would have had to score a brace for Barcelona because they're in a 3-2 shootout because they got caught in the counterattack. right? So we're almost expecting that he has to score more goals for Barcelona to win because of some of the frailties on the counterattack.